They gave their golden child a house key wrapped in velvet, while I got an unmarked envelope with a job listing and a forged signature. But they forgot one thing. I've always known how to survive without applauding this Christmas. I came home not to be chosen, but to choose for myself. Christmas morning. The house smelled of burnt cinnamon and old velvet, the kind of scent memory clings to even when everything else tries to leave. Claire Hart stood at the edge of the living room, hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee, the steam curling against her face like an old ghost. Her mother, Margaret Hart, floated around the room in her iconic crimson velvet robe, the one she wore every Christmas for as long as Claire could remember. Regal and glowing, she handed out gifts with a smile so wide it made her cheeks pink. She always gave the illusion of warmth, like a candle lit under glass. Claire already knew what was coming. The tradition never changed, only deepened, like the cracks in the ceramic reindeer ornament that still hung from the tree. Jenna Blake, Claire's younger sister by 2 years, walked in fashionably late, radiating charm, like perfume. Her blowout was flawless, her rose-colored sweater hugging her like it had been stitched by affection itself. Everyone adored Jenna not just because she sparkled, but because Margaret and Douglas Hart, their parents, polished her until she did. Claire smiled without feeling it. That's what this season required. Performance. When Margaret handed Jenna a small gold-wrapped box, Claire already felt the air thicken. Jenna gasped on cue. That gasp-a signature move she had perfected as a child sent ripples of delight through Margaret and Douglas. Inside the box, a silver house key nestled in velvet. We bought her a house, Margaret said, voice catching like she'd just announced the second coming. Jenna squealed. Douglas's face bloomed with pride. Claire didn't flinch. She smiled again, not from joy, but from muscle memory. Her gift came next. No pomp, no ribbon, just a plain envelope, dropped into her lap like a receipt. Douglas muttered, a flat here you go. No eye contact. No sentiment. Inside. She waited. She didn't need to open it to know. The weight of it was already a language. She spoke fluently, absence wrapped in obligation. She held it in her lap as Jenna babbled about granite countertops and walk-in closets. The house was a reward. Claire's envelope was a reminder. When she finally opened it, the confirmation was almost poetic. A job listing, printed in grayscale. Administrative assistant. Entry level. No salary noted. At the bottom, Douglas had scribbled in blocky pen strokes. Thought this might be more your speed. No one noticed her fingers curled tightly around the envelope's edge. They never noticed. Claire was 9 when she first realized she'd been drafted into a supporting role in her own life. Her birthday, forgotten. She'd baked cupcakes herself, chocolate with too much oil and no frosting, while Margaret brushed Jenna's hair in the other room. No balloons, no card, no song. Jenna's birthday that same year. A backyard party with ponies. Neighbors who barely spoke to showed up with glittery presents. It had always been that way. By middle school, Claire stopped expecting anything. She made her way, bought her dresses, cut her hair, when Margaret forgot the appointment. They called it independence. What it was neglect dressed up as praise. Senior year, Claire earned the top academic scholarship in the state. At the awards ceremony, she walked onto a lit stage in front of 500 people. There was Margaret in the front row, not clapping, just scrolling through her phone. When Claire stepped down, the certificate still warm in her hand, Margaret looked up and said, well, at least she's good at something. That sentence became a scar. Back in the present, Claire left the envelope on the coffee table, untouched again. Margaret gushed over Jenna's French doors. Douglas nodded, refilling his coffee like everything was as it should be. Jenna twirled the new house key in her fingers like it was a wand. The noise was overwhelming. Yet none of it reached Claire. Her thoughts were far, far away. She wasn't angry, not exactly, but something had shifted. A line had been drawn, and, this time, she was ready to stop stepping over it. Weeks later, the call came. Margaret's voice was sweet, almost cloying. Her words clung together in syrup. Your father's back isn't what it used to be. Could use help lifting some boxes? She didn't mention the envelope. The job, the key, the hierarchy is written in gift wrap. Claire hesitated, but guilt is a master forger. Turning resentment into duty, she said yes. The drive took 4 hours. The house looked the same, too neat, too preserved. Douglas still edged the lawn with a ruler. The air smelled of lemon polish and something always burning slightly in the oven. Jenna wasn't there. She's busy, Margaret said with a shrug that sounded like blame. By Saturday night, Claire couldn't sleep. The guest room, her old room, still had her soccer trophies. Still had the posters from 2003 curling at the corners, but the walls felt tighter now. She wandered down the hall barefoot, guided by an instinct deeper than curiosity. Douglas's office door was ajar. Unusual, he never left it open. Inside the safe, unlocked, that alone was an invitation. Claire couldn't ignore. Inside the safe, folders, documents, deeds, financial records. Among them, a sealed envelope labeled to be opened upon death. She shouldn't have opened it, but she did. Inside was a revised will. Her name appeared first, next to a parcel number and property ID. A house that Claire never knew existed. A house in her name. She flipped to the second page. A signature authorized the purchase. Her signature, except it wasn't. The angle of the R was wrong. The slant in the E was off. Someone had forged her name. She sat still. Breath caught in her throat. She wasn't just excluded, she'd been used. The next morning, breakfast passed like nothing had happened. Margaret made eggs. Douglas read the paper. Jenna didn't call. No one noticed that Claire's eyes no longer followed the conversation. She was done looking for applause in a house full of mirrors. By noon, she was on the road again. She didn't slam the door, didn't make a scene, but something had begun. At home, Claire pulled her credit reports. Lines of accounts, dormant trusts, flagged activity, all connected to her name. One property matched the parcel in the will. A lake house. She reached out to a college friend, a lawyer. If you wanted to pursue fraud, you'd have a case, the lawyer said. But that's not what you want, is it? She was right. Claire didn't want revenge. She wanted the truth, then power. So they started digging. A property purchased under Claire's name, a trust, funded through her SSN loan activity, transferring family funds using Claire's identity, and most damning of all, the lake house had been mortgaged to fund Jenna's failed skincare business. It was unraveling, quietly, elegantly, like seams coming loose in a dress. Everyone thought would never tear. And Claire, she bought the lake house, not as Claire Hart, but through a shell, LLC, a holding agent, clean, legal, anonymous. The snow began to fall the day the deed transfer cleared. Claire sat in her small apartment, the furnace kicking on in huffs, its rhythm strangely soothing. The paperwork was spread out across her dining table. Notary seals, bank statements, routing numbers, trustee signatures, all legally binding, all perfectly hers. The lake house, the one her parents mortgaged in secret to save Jenna's vanity project, was now hers. And they didn't even know it. She stared at the final document, owner Claire Hart, printed in bold, just above the property coordinates. No fanfare, no ribbon, just black ink on white paper. And power. For the next few weeks, Claire kept her head down. Work, errands, sleep. She didn't tell anyone, not even her lawyer friend, the full extent of what she felt. It wasn't vengeance, it was a severance. She had finally snipped the last invisible string, binding her to their silent expectations. Margaret texted first. A short, "Will you be home for Christmas? Bring wine if you can. Jenna's flying in." Then again, 2 days later, "I hope you're not working too hard. Dad's knee is acting up again. We might need help lifting the tree." Claire didn't respond. She read each message and let it sink like a pebble in deep water. Small, inconsequential ripples, then stillness. Douglas followed with an email titled, "Career Opportunity." Just a thought attached was a job listing. Data entry, full-time, stable. In the body of the message, he wrote, "Something you might be good at. Jenna says hi." Claire read the email twice before closing it. Then she poured herself a glass of wine, sat at the window, and watched the sky turn from gray to darker gray. She remembered the night before her college graduation. She had been valedictorian, something they hadn't mentioned once. Margaret had called her the night before. "We'll try to be there, but Jenna's commercial shoot just got moved up." They never came. But Douglas sent a bouquet of lilies the week after, not to her apartment. To her dorm mailroom, unlabeled, no card. Just a quiet reminder that absence can be dressed up as effort. When Claire first stepped into the lake house, she braced herself for the smell of memories. But the air was stale, quiet, almost untouched. Nothing haunted the space except disuse. The walls were beige, the furniture is old. The floor creaked just like Margaret always complained. But Claire ran her fingers along the windowsills and whispered, "Mine." That word echoed in the space, bouncing off walls that had likely heard Jenna's laughter and Margaret's praise for decades, but never Claire's name in joy. She walked the halls slowly, like someone reclaiming a ghost town. Each creak, every chip in the wood, every dated fixture, they were real, unpolished, imperfect, just like her. December crept in again. Claire bought a gift, a plain white box, matte finish. Inside, a sealed envelope. No glitter, no tag, just the truth. The documents were precise. The notarized deed lists. Claire, as the sole owner. The forged signature on the earlier property filing, a legal note from her attorney outlining unauthorized financial activity and usage of Claire's identity for internal asset movement. She sealed the envelope in wax. Red, the same shade as Margaret's robe. She tucked the box in her coat pocket. No bag, no bows. The Hart family home was decorated identically to last year, same wreath, same reindeer mugs, with fading gold trim. The cinnamon rolls were overbaked at the edges. Again, Jenna arrived early this time, beaming, wrapped in a new cashmere set. She kissed the air near Claire's cheek and began a well-rehearsed story about a podcast brand deal. Douglas was by the fireplace. Margaret adjusted the pillows obsessively. Everything in place. Claire slid her white box under the tree. Silent. Margaret noticed, smiled absently, then moved on to gush about Jenna's big year. We're just so proud. The commercial last spring, and now the interviews. Claire nodded, sipped her coffee, waited. Gifts were opened. Jenna unwrapped a designer handbag and gasped theatrically. Margaret teared up. Douglas chuckled, then came Claire's turn. She handed Douglas the white box. He looked surprised, mildly amused, like he'd found a penny in his shoe. Jenna giggled. Probably socks. She quipped. Douglas peeled it open slowly. He broke the wax seal, unfolded the deed. Paused, his smile faded by degrees. His eyes scanned the words again. Slower, Margaret leaned in, her face warm with curiosity, until her eyes met the header on the second page. Fraudulent signature filing and asset reclamation, legal review. She blinked, then again, her voice cracked. Claire, what is this? Claire met her mother's eyes for the first time in years without flinching. It's exactly what it looks like. Douglas didn't speak. Not a word. Margaret, read further, her breath catching as the implications set in. She turned to him. You didn't tell me. It wasn't a question. It was a break. A soft shattering, clean and irreversible. Jenna held her purse tighter, as if it might offer a script to follow. But for once, she had no lines to speak. No one did. The silence in the room stretched so thick it took on weight. It pressed into their lungs, their faces, their bones. Claire stood, smoothed her sweater. Just so we're clear, she said, voice steady. I won't be sharing the lake house, not this time. She didn't wait for a response. At the door, Claire turned back briefly. Douglas sat rigid, papers in hand. Margaret stood, lips parted, caught between confusion and betrayal. Jenna was frozen. None of them moved. None of them spoke. I'm not giving it back, Claire said. Not the house, not my name. Not anymore. Then she opened the door. The cold December air flooded in, cutting through the stale warmth like a blade. Claire sat in the old armchair by the lake house window, wrapped in a blanket, a cup of coffee growing cold beside her. She watched the snow fall soft, certain, soundless. She didn't feel victorious. She felt unburdened. She didn't plan to call anyone. Not even her lawyer. Not even the one friend who had always understood. Because this wasn't a story that needed witnesses. This was a release, not a performance. And it belonged to her. Snow blanketed the lake house like a soft truth, quiet, undeniable, and utterly indifferent to anyone's plans. Claire Hart watched the flakes fall from her window. Their descent unhurried, gentle, relentless. Outside, the lake had begun to freeze over in patches. The pine trees bowed slightly under the weight of winter, and the world seemed to exhale with her inside. The house smelled faintly of cedar and dust. She'd lit a small fire in the hearth, its flame inconsistent, snapping sharply now and then, like it had something to say. She hadn't heard from her parents since Christmas morning. Not a call, not a text, not even Jenna's usual emoji-laced memes. Silence. But this time, it wasn't a punishment. It was an acknowledgement. The first perhaps she had ever received. The lake house had many drawers, and Claire wasn't someone who opened things without a reason. But that night, while reaching for an old throw blanket, she stumbled across something strange. A thin leather-bound folder, yellowed slightly with age. Inside, handwritten letters, from Margaret, not to her, but to Douglas, dated over a decade ago. Doug, I don't know what to do with Claire. She's good, independent, capable, But it's like trying to hug a cactus. There's always something sharp between us. Jenna's so easy. She fits the mold. Claire keeps shaping herself into something else, and I don't know how to mother that. Another. From the same year Claire had graduated from high school. You keep saying she'll figure it out, and she does. But does that mean we shouldn't help her? Or is helping her insulting? I wish I knew how to reach her. Every time I try, she stiffens. She won't let me in. Claire sat back in the chair, the words heavy in her lap. They weren't cruel, but they were cowardly. They revealed something she'd long suspected. Her parents didn't ignore her out of malice. They ignored her out of fear. Fear of how her strength made their favoritism too obvious. Fear of how her competence made Jenna's neediness feel like affection. Fear of how Claire reminded them of the things they chose to suppress in themselves. It was January 7th, nearly 2 weeks after Christmas, when Claire's phone rang. Her screen lit up: Mom. She didn't answer. The voicemail came a few minutes later. Hi, honey. Just wanted to see how you're doing. We're all still kind of processing. Jenna's been quiet. Your father hasn't said much. Anyway, I'm thinking of you. That's all. No mention of the lake house. No questions. Just a careful sidestep around the crater Claire had left behind. Later that night, a text from Jenna. I didn't know about the house. I swear. I never would have then. Are you mad at me? I don't know what I did. That was the heartbreak of it all. Jenna truly didn't know. She had been loved so completely, so loudly, that it never occurred to her someone else in the room had been going cold for years. Claire typed a response, then deleted it. Then typed again. Finally, she sent. It's not about the house. It's about the roles we were given, and how long I played mine without ever agreeing to it. Jenna didn't reply for hours. Then, finally, I miss you. Claire stared at the message. It was honest, maybe even true. But she didn't respond. Because missing someone doesn't fix the damage done while you were being adored. 3 days later, Margaret arrived at the lake house. Unannounced, Claire saw her car pull up from the window and sat motionless, unsure whether to meet her at the door or pretend she wasn't home. But Margaret knocked twice, then waited. Claire opened the door slowly. Margaret looked older, makeup light, posture a little stooped, eyes hollowed out by something that looked like truth. May I come in? Claire stepped aside. They sat in silence for several minutes. Margaret glanced around the living room like she was trying to locate her reflection in something that no longer mirrored her back. Then she spoke. I never thought you'd do what you did. Claire raised an eyebrow. You mean protect what was already mine? Margaret winced. No. I mean, make it impossible to pretend. She placed something on the coffee table. A photo of the lake house. From a summer 20 years ago. Jenna is in the hammock. Douglas is at the grill. Claire's young knees scraped, holding a jar of fireflies. You used to chase light, Margaret whispered. But I kept pulling you into the dark. I didn't realize I was doing it until it was too late. Claire said nothing, because no apology had been offered. Only regret. Margaret stood. After a while, I won't ask for forgiveness, just space. And maybe a coffee sometime. She paused at the door. You were right not to give it back. I just wish we'd made you feel like it was yours before you had to fight for it. Then she left. Over the next few weeks, Claire slowly renovated the lake house. Not grand changes, just corrections. She repainted the hallway a soft gray blue, replaced the old rug in the den, donated the throw pillows that smelled faintly of Chanel, No. 5, and suppression. She framed one photo for the mantel, not the old family photo, just one of her, sitting on the back porch, coffee in hand, snow falling softly behind her, a self-portrait of reclamation. Claire wrote a letter one night to her younger self. She wrote about the cupcake birthday that no one remembered, the scholarship speech no one heard, the envelopes that weighed more than they looked. She ended it with, you were always enough. They just didn't know how to love someone who didn't need them in the way they were prepared to give. Then she folded the letter and tucked it inside a drawer. Some truths don't need to be sent. They just need to live somewhere safe. One morning, Claire stepped outside just as the sun began to rise. The lake shimmered beneath a new layer of ice. The horizon tinged with a lavender hue that promised change. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt centered, and in a family that once taught her that silence meant invisibility, she had learned instead that silence could mean peace. A pause, a breath, a beginning. The thaw came slowly by early March. The snow began to recede from the edges of the lake. The ice cracked in soft, slow fractures, echoing faintly like a memory letting go. The pine trees shook themselves dry like tired dogs waking from hibernation. The world was no longer asleep. It was quietly reassembling. So was Claire Hart. The lake house no longer felt like a stranger's story. The chipped banister, the drafty windows, the humming heater that kicked on to lay tall of it belonged to her now, not as a gift, not as a hand-me-down. As a declaration. She'd stopped checking her phone for missed calls. The silence from Margaret, Douglas, and Jenna wasn't cruel anymore. It was accurate, a reflection, not a punishment. It arrived on a Thursday. No return address, just Claire Hart in handwriting she recognized instantly. Margaret's single quotes S. Inside, a photo album, bound in faded navy leather. No note, just the album. Claire hesitated, then she opened it. The first photo was of her at age 6, missing front teeth, holding a frog in both hands like it was a crown jewel. The next a school play. Claire, center stage, dressed as a tree, smiling so hard her eyes disappeared. Then came a flood. First soccer game, science fair, high school prom. All the photos she had never seen. All moments she had assumed no one noticed. Each one had a date in the corner. Each one, a reminder. She had been seen, just not praised. She didn't cry, but she closed the album, with care, like it contained something living. That night, she left it on the mantel beside the photo of herself on the porch, the one she had framed weeks earlier. Because both were true, the overlooked girl, and the woman who reclaimed her name. The knock came on a Sunday morning. Claire opened the door to find Jenna standing awkwardly, a tote bag on one shoulder, snow still in her hair. I was driving by. Thought I'd see if you were here. Claire stepped aside. Wordlessly, carefully, Jenna wandered through the house like it was a museum of something she'd only read about. It's smaller than I remember, she said, touching a corner of the window frame. It always was, Claire replied. We were just smaller, too. Jenna stood still. Then, why didn't you tell me? About the lake house, about everything. Claire sat down, gesturing for Jenna to do the same, because telling you wouldn't have changed anything. You were living a version of reality they built for you. You were loved loudly. I was tolerated efficiently. Jenna blinked hard. I didn't ask for that. I know, Claire said. But I didn't ask to be invisible either. They sat for a long time. No accusations. No rehearsed apologies. Eventually, Jenna said, you were always the strong one. I think we all leaned on that, too hard. Claire nodded. Strength isn't the same as being okay, Jenna. Weeks later, Claire received a voice memo from Margaret. Just under a minute. Claire, I listened to an old voicemail of yours today. You were 13. You called to tell me you made the volleyball team. I never called back. I remembered it like a badge. Proof you didn't need me. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe that was you reaching out. I don't know if this helps, but I see it now. I do. Claire didn't reply. Not because she didn't feel something, but some acknowledgments are enough on their own. She didn't need more. She didn't want to re-enter the cycle. She had walked out of that house, and she wasn't going back in. One early April morning, Claire painted the front door of the lake house. She chose deep green, the same color as the forest behind the lake when summer peaked. As the final brushstroke dried, she stepped back and smiled. Not perfect, but at present, the act of putting color on something that had been neutral for too long felt like a vow. Claire eventually rented out part of the lake house to a young couple, teachers from a nearby town. They had a golden retriever that barked at squirrels and dragged pine needles inside. She didn't mind. She even laughed when the dog chewed the corner of the porch mat because life wasn't about maintaining an untouchable space, it was about finally living in one you chose. She took up sketching again, took long walks, started writing small essays, nothing public, just for herself. She built new rituals: Sunday tea by the fireplace, Tuesdays for baking, Thursdays for silence, not loneliness, silence, the kind she used to dread, now, the kind she defended. In late spring, Claire wrote another letter. This time to her future self. She wrote, you did not break the cycle because you won. You broke it because you stopped playing. You chose peace over performance. And even if they never say the right thing, you did. You didn't wait to be handed your worth. You took it. She placed it inside the same drawer that now held the first letter, to her younger self. 2 letters, 2 anchors, 1 story. Hers. That summer, Claire stood barefoot on the lake house deck. Morning coffee in hand, the lake glassy and still. Mist rose from the surface in ribbons. Delicate as breath, a bird called from the trees. She closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. She didn't feel angry or vindicated. She felt real, unmirrored, unperformed, unapologetic. Just Claire, and that finally was enough.